Welcome to another exciting episode from Marvelous Videos. I'm your host, Tia Ayer. Bullseye Origins, Marvel's psychopathic assassin, deserves to be a part of the MCU. Bullseye is an iconic villain from the Marvel Universe. He is a psychopathic assassin who can hit pretty much any target that he chooses. He has appeared in many movies and TV series. He was a part of the Netflix series Daredevil. However, the Netflix series got a bunch of things wrong about him in the storylines that he appeared in. In today's video, we plan on clearing out all of these misunderstandings about the storylines of this menace to society. We will be exploring his origins and the various storylines that he is a part of in the Marvel Universe. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A child of abuse to a deadly assassin. There was not much known about Bullseye until he was captured in a U.S. prison and interrogated there. It was during this interrogation that he revealed his past. He said he grew up in the Bronx with his brother and an abusive father. Playing with guns was the primary form of entertainment for his brother. This behavior of his brother's fascinated him and eventually led him to becoming an excellent shot. He claimed that his brother attempted to kill his father by setting their house on fire when Bullseye was 10 years old. However, most of this information is quite questionable because Bullseye made his escape pretty much immediately after this and mocked his interrogators by claiming that much of what he had said was untrue, including the claim that his brother had set fire to the house. Honestly, are we even surprised that a psychotic assassin is also a pathological liar? I, for one, am not. In reality, or what we assume is real, it was Bullseye himself who set the house on fire. Later on, he started a fire in the prison where his father was being kept as well, and he left him there to die. However, his attempt to kill his father was unsuccessful. Another time, while talking about his childhood, he said to have painted his abusive father's forehead with a bullseye while the man was drunk and passed out. Soon after the attempt to kill his father, we see that Bullseye is put into a foster home. Usually, foster homes are not places where children, especially in comics, thrive, but Bullseye did. He started playing baseball at the high school level when he was in foster care, and he was quite good at it too. He was a highly skilled pitcher, and he could have gone ahead and had a real career in it, but he turned down a scholarship offer that he received. Instead, he chose to play in the lower leagues. Once after playing about 3 games in the minor leagues, he was called up to play in a sold-out major league game. In the bottom of the 9th inning, with 2 outs after having 0 hits in the whole game, he felt bored and asked the manager to take him out of the game. The coach demanded that he continued the game, which he did not want to. The guy battling for the opposite team made fun of him and called him a coward. A big mistake, really, since he ended up dead after that. Bullseye struck him, bang, in the middle of his head with the ball and killed him. He said just one thing as the ball struck: Bullseye. Of course, after that game, he was found guilty of manslaughter. In another origin narrative, Bullseye was shown to have grown up in a trailer park with a physically abusive alcoholic father. In his story, he attended a below-average school, and he probably lived a miserable life. In this version of the story, Bullseye used a handgun that went off because of a toy arrow and faked his father's death. It might sound a little bizarre that a gun went off so easily, but it is actually quite common. It's not quite clear how many details in this version are accurate, though, again, considering the fact that he is a pathological liar. Soon after he grew up, he started working as a freelance assassin, which is the whole most ideal profession for someone who enjoys killing people. He was also a soldier for a brief period. One of his first missions as a soldier, a Viet Cong fighter, had the upper hand, and Bullseye's weapon failed to fire, which led to him using whatever weapon he had at hand. Instead of throwing the rifle, he used his bayonet to slay his attacker. Eventually, this became his signature style of killing. He used to throw weapons at his targets to kill them. The National Security Agency eventually hired him as an assassin due to his cool manner and special abilities. There, he was given the responsibility of instructing the Contras in Nicaragua. He claimed, however, to have had plans to quit the NSA by the time he showed up. Instead, he intended to loot the Contras and then run away. The only problem was that they were always broke. So he did what any mastermind supervillain does, and he made the best of the situation and used it to his advantage. Within 7 hours of learning of their destitution, he became their commander. He ordered them to seize a landship strip that was being used by the Colombian cocaine smugglers as a staging place before the drugs took a trip to the United States. I don't think there is anyone else who is bold enough to go against cocaine smugglers. Let us be honest, they are the scariest in the business. Due to this interruption, the smugglers were unable to transmit their drugs. Meanwhile, Bullseye spread the word about the new force holding the airstrip while using his helpless Nicaraguan interpreter, Pablo, and putting him in charge. Nevertheless, Paulo was nothing more than a tool. In order to negotiate a new agreement as Paulo's purported right-hand man, Bullseye intended to bring various leaders of organized crime to the airfield. His plan was to then take their money and run, leaving Paulo to face the wrath of the various other gangs and mafias. However, the Punisher, Frank Castle, showed up before the agreement could be consummated. Here he engaged in combat with the Punisher. He had even collaborated with fellow mercenary Deadpool during his early endeavors. Bullseye barely managed to escape from a tremendous explosion in which the Punisher murdered all the leaders of organized crime. Later, Bullseye was able to hurt the Punisher during these furious fights and avoid or neutralize a number of his weapons. Bullseye then painted a bullseye on his forehead using some blood-reddened mud to make fun of Castle's failure to strike him. By the time the Drug Enforcement Administration officials came, the fight was over and the Punisher had escaped. Bullseye surrendered to DEA operatives, and he was shortly given the mission of infiltrating the Kingpin's criminal organization. He acquired a disguise, left once again, and once again rose to become one of the most lethal hitmen in history. His run-ins with Daredevil. Bullseye originally gained popularity in New York City as a hitman after a slew of murders and extortion attempts. He is so fearless and unafraid of getting caught that he made his actions public by accepting an interview with the Daily Bugle. After that, Daredevil and Bullseye engaged in a fight at the circus, where he solidified his image as an extortionist, but later on, the hero located Bullseye and managed to stop his extortion attempts. Bullseye was then recruited by Maxwell Glenn to kill Daredevil's alter ego, lawyer Matt Murdock, but was stopped by Daredevil. Bullseye vowed retaliation since in his eyes, his imposing reputation had been destroyed. Bullseye battled Daredevil whenever he had the chance, whether it was kidnapping the Black Widow, robbing a TV studio, or just chasing him down, but sadly for him, Daredevil always managed to catch him and turn him over to the authorities. He is defeated by Daredevil once more, and the anguish of his constant humiliation causes him to have a breakdown. It is subsequently discovered that he had developed a brain tumor, which then starts to produce headaches and hallucinations for him. These voices and hallucinations kept telling him that everyone he encounters is Daredevil, and this ultimately leads to his collapse. He used to keep trying to murder people because he thought that they were Daredevil. He attempts to break out of jail, but Daredevil captures him, obviously. And after that, he undergoes surgery and the tumor is successfully removed. The tumor symptoms immediately go away, and defense attorneys are successful in getting him released on the grounds that the tumor was the only factor in his illegal behavior. He is paid to kill the Kingpin time and time again without reason. Apparently, this persuades the Kingpin to hire him as a primary assassin, but he is let go the day after he watches the Kingpin's humiliating defeat at the hands of Daredevil. These failed attempts ultimately become a running joke in the Daredevil Netflix series. He was ultimately jailed, and upon his return from yet another Daredevil's imposed captivity, he was enraged to discover that the Kingpin had elected Elektra, Daredevil's ex-lover, as his assassin in the meantime instead. He got so upset about it that he went ahead and murdered her with only a playing card and her own sigh. He used this as proof to get rehired by the Kingpin, but he failed to convince him. The Kingpin instead put forth a condition. He would rehire Bullseye if he managed to kill Daredevil. Bullseye then battled the infuriated hero over the skyline of New York City until Daredevil finally let Bullseye fall, presumably to his death from a telephone wire. While Bullseye was able to live, his spine was broken, leaving him paralyzed, and with an unloaded .38 caliber handgun in his hand while recuperating in the hospital, Daredevil secretly entered Bullseye's bedside and started playing a round of fictitious Russian roulette. Bullseye is given the even-numbered turns even though the handgun being used in the game is secretly empty, so he will believe that the last shot will kill him. This incident has been mentioned by Bullseye as the cause of his biggest feud with Daredevil Daredevil. Later on, Bullseye is shown with full mobility. This happens because his bones were laced with adamantium with the assistance of a Japanese criminal overlord named Lord Darkwind. But Lord Darkwind did a silly thing. He thought that saving Bullseye's life would make him willingly act as Lord Darkwind's lead assassin. Bullseye, however, declines to work for free despite all of that. Instead, he makes yet another attempt to retake his place as the Kingpin's top assassin, even though he knows that he won't be able to make it. Bullseye, who is now well, went back to New York to continue his mercenary work. He finally breaks out of jail and engages Captain America in combat. He engages in combat with Crossbones as well in an effort to kill the Red Skull and take back his former status as top assassin. He takes advantage of his amnesic Daredevil and impersonates him to conduct crimes in an effort to discredit his reputation. However, he gets caught in one of his early heists by the trophy wife of one of his targets. It is not difficult to identify someone who is not your husband when you have lost faith in them. He falls in love with his wife, who begs him to take her away, but he keeps her in his abandoned refuge as his girlfriend, trying to flatter her by trying to pacify her with stolen goods. But when she grows to understand his mental instability and is alarmed by one of his psychotic episodes, she decides to leave him. Bullseye gradually immerses himself in his Daredevil impersonation, so much that it reaches the point where Bullseye starts thinking he is Daredevil. This was the mistake that the real Daredevil decided to exploit in order to destroy the villain. The Dark Hawkeye Connection. Another interesting storyline where the psychotic assassin appears in the Dark Avengers. The storyline features Norman Osborn and various political games. He takes down S.H.I.E.L.D. and creates his own spy organization instead. Here we see Bullseye under the alias of Hawkeye. He is a perfect replacement for the hero considering both of them are near-perfect shots. There he kills Morgan Le Fay on his first mission with the Dark Avengers, but the Sorceress comes back with a new army full of demons. Hawkeye defeats the Hulkbuster robot after killing its operator when the Dark Avengers battle a misbehaving version of the machine. He takes credit for all of his victories because he is a villain, and they are notoriously not used to teamwork. Osborn does not consider that and reprimands him because he plays a role in the death of 36 civilians after the robot collapsed on top of them. Bullseye doesn't feel any remorse. In fact, he demands credit for it instead. Later, Hawkeye intervenes to stop 3 men from attacking a woman, and he murders the guys. The poor lady unintentionally enrages him by referring to Osborn as his boss. So yes, the poor lady also loses her life. Just then, he observes a news team photographing the incident from a helicopter, and what better way to cover up an incident than by blowing up a whole helicopter? After this, he is told to go after Deadpool. However, Deadpool eventually wins and stabs Bullseye, who then wakes up in a hospital bed. He very smartly decides to go after Deadpool once again. Unsurprisingly, Deadpool survives all of his attacks, and he even runs a car over Bullseye's leg, and that is just how easily Deadpool was winning. So Bullseye paid off Deadpool to save his life under the ruse that Osborn asked him to do it. Osborn subsequently instructs Bullseye to kill Daredevil when he finds out that Daredevil is the leader of the Hand. After that, Bullseye and Daredevil engage in combat as Daredevil undergoes the trials necessary to join the Hand. So clearly Daredevil is not the leader, but hey, gotta trust the rumor mill in the villain business. Bullseye then sets up a bomb in a building where there are nearly 100 people. Daredevil is unaware of this little fact and keeps fighting against Bullseye, and when the building collapses, Bullseye flees, leaving Daredevil to wallow in his misery, ridiculing the possibility that he would have been killed if Daredevil had decided to kill him. He also has encounters with the Punisher and the Molecule Man. In fact, the Molecule Man had turned Bullseye into a liquid, and he still tried to continue fighting. I don't know whether to laugh at this point or applaud the effort. Bullseye as presented in the Netflix series Daredevil. The live-action Netflix series Daredevil features Benjamin Dex Poindexter in its 3rd season. Wilson Bethel plays him as an adult, Cameron Mann as a kid, and Connor Proft as a teenager. In this version, he is a sharpshooter who has previously served in the U.S. Army before joining the FBI. He is also known to be suffering from various mental health difficulties. Poindexter, we see, was born in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. From an early age itself, he knew that his parents had failed as parents. They used to berate and neglect him instead of teaching him what is right and what is wrong. However, they died under mysterious and unknown circumstances, after which he was sent off to Lindenhurst Home for Boys. without having any personal relationships with other people. Despite that, he continued to train his amazing skill of pitching the ball with immaculate precision after joining their baseball club. He was his coach's favorite. During a particular baseball game, nobody from the opposing team was able to hit a single ball that Poindexter threw, and as the game progressed, he only grew more confident in his abilities, and he was sure that by the time the game was over, they would win with a clear lead of a sizable margin. However, Coach Bradley pulled him aside and informed him that he would be benching him. His reasoning was that the other kids also needed a chance to play, but this only mortified Benjamin. He got so upset and frustrated, and he threw a ball at a pole which went and hit Bradley in the head and killed him. However, since the ball wasn't aimed directly at Bradley, his death was believed to be an accident by others. The truth about his intentions, on the other hand, is ambiguous. After this, he went to therapy where he confessed to killing Bradley on purpose. He was quite attached to the therapist, Eileen Mercer, who ultimately died too early due to cancer. He dealt with her death by joining the Army. There he managed to hone his throwing skills using firearms and learning how to engage in combat. After he left the Army, Poindexter started working at a suicide prevention center. Poindexter had been working there for a year when he started to believe that he was in love with his coworker Julie Barnes, when in reality he was just obsessed with her. Poindexter had a conversation with Craig, a caller at the center who was contemplating suicide. Instead of assisting, Poindexter talked to Craig and advised him to murder his stepfather. Barnes quit the suicide prevention program to pursue ballet. Shortly after she left, Poindexter also quit the center. Poindexter graduated from Quantico after that, and the FBI hired him. After establishing himself as a top-notch agent, Tammy Hatley sent Poindexter to serve as the field sniper at the FBI's New York Crime Division. This was obviously a result of his remarkable accuracy abilities. However, his obsession did not go away. He just managed to control it instead and continued with it from a distance. Wilson Frisk made a deal with the FBI to give them information about criminal groups in New York City. Poindexter was hired to be a part of the team in charge of getting Frisk off Rikers Island. However, the FBI was unexpectedly ambushed by the Albanian syndicate while transporting Frisk to the presidential hotel, resulting in the destruction of the cars around Frisk's, causing his car to crash and flip over. Poindexter was among those injured when the other cars were assaulted as well, which led to the deaths of numerous FBI agents. When Poindexter came, he observed that these Albanians had encircled Frisk's car and were trying to get him by sawing through the roof in order to kill him for betraying both Mother Teresa and Vic Jasufi. Poindexter, who was armed with just a revolver, was able to outmaneuver the Albanians. Poindexter then emerged from the shadows, taking advantage of the element of surprise and starting firing at the Albanians. He killed a few of them with pinpoint precision before the others fled, and he found refuge behind a car. Poindexter even managed to shoot a bullet that ricocheted off Frisk's car and killed an Albanian hiding behind cover. At this point, the remaining Albanians decided to surrender because they knew they had no chance against Poindexter's incredible skills with a gun. Poindexter murdered 2 of the Albanians who had come forward and tried to surrender while pleading for compassion because he did not have any compassion, obviously. Shortly after, he was attacked by 2 Albanians from behind. But why would you ever doubt the man? He tossed magazines at each of them, effectively killing them with devastating precision, further demonstrating his capacity to kill with nearly any common object. Despite his initial feeling of terror, Frisk also observed Poindexter's antics and became very interested. Frisk climbed out of his crushed automobile and held his hand up to Poindexter, where he captured him after making sure his friends were still alive. After a disastrous dinner date with Julie Barnes where she realized that she was being stalked, Benjamin had a mental breakdown where he can constantly hear her voice. He could continuously hear her demanding that he let go of her arm, and meanwhile Frisk was trying his best to manipulate him. As the sequence of events proceeded, Benjamin got to know that the FBI was blaming the incident at the Albanian syndicate on him. Benjamin was utterly humiliated and left the FBI. Frisk, on the other hand, managed to manipulate Poindexter, who just wanted to feel like he wouldn't be abandoned again. In an effort to tarnish the image of the actual Daredevil and eliminate dangers to Wilson Frisk's revival as a crime lord, Frisk manipulates Poindexter into wearing a fake Daredevil outfit and carrying out strikes after garnering his attention while defending the latter from attackers. While posing as Daredevil, Poindexter battles the actual Daredevil twice and develops feelings for a bystander called Julie. However, Frisk Frisk had her killed to increase his control over Poindexter. Benjamin obviously does not believe that Julie is dead, much less at the hands of Frisk, but it is true. He feels utterly betrayed as he had even killed his old colleague, Agent Ray Nadim, as directed by Frisk's fiancée, Vanessa Mariana, only to go through such betrayal. Poindexter crashes the wedding reception of Frisk and Mariana in an effort to get retribution after discovering that Frisk had deceived him. Frisk, Daredevil, and Poindexter get into a massive fight where Daredevil ultimately defeats Frisk. He also beat Poindexter, who later breaks his spine. Poindexter then has an experimental procedure to repair his spine. The doctors continued with their procedure as Poindexter had agreed to undergo an experimental procedure on his broken spine, despite being aware of the possibility that it could leave him permanently paralyzed. His vertebrae were then infused and reinforced with cognium. Poindexter awoke after the procedure and noticed that his iris was turning like a bullseye. Colin Farrell perfected the role in the movie Daredevil. Bullseye was played by Colin Farrell. In the 2003 Daredevil movie, with an Irish heritage, this figure forewent the traditional attire in favor of the metalhead or biker look, a shaved head and a bullseye branded on his forehead. It takes a lot of courage as an actor to do so much for a role, and for that we must applaud him. His character mostly employs shurikens, though he can use other tiny things as well. The comic book version initially took on a nearly identical appearance of Bullseye as presented by Colin Farrell before the movie came out, but has since switched back to the conventional form, keeping just the scar. Joe Quesada, according to the director Mark Steven Johnson, talked him out of wearing the customary outfit. Additionally, Farrell was pushed to retain his Irish accent. To comprehend Bullseye, he also had to read the Daredevil comics by Frank Miller. It is one of the most iconic movies with a strong and influential role played by Bullseye. What makes Bullseye so dangerous? Bullseye poses the natural talent of projectile hurl almost at any object with fatal accuracy and force. Some of his exploits include spitting his own teeth through a human skull, throwing a paper aircraft to a distant rooftop, slitting someone's neck with a straw, murdering 4 people with screws, and lacerating someone's throat with a playing card from a distance of even 100 yards. Bullseye has been trained in karate and is a competent hand-to-hand combatant, in addition to a deadly accurate projectile throwing ability. He is also incredibly skilled with both traditional guns and edge-throwing weapons. Bullseye is also familiar with every pressure point and weak place on or in the human body. This is one of the main reasons why he is one of the best assassins in the world. Before approaching his targets, Bullseye has a compulsive urge to research their backgrounds, skills, and interpersonal connections. Bullseye uses his knowledge to try to predict the actions and reactions of many of his adversaries. Like Bullseye's infatuation with Elektra or Daredevil, this addiction frequently spills over into his personal life, and he has some level of control over his bodily functions as well, since we see him fake a cardiac arrest to break out of S.H.I.E.L.D. Bullseye is one of the most deadly and psychotic villains in the Marvel Universe. Surprisingly enough, he is the only villain who also goes to therapy. He is pretty much the evil version of Hawkeye and one of the most interesting characters. Do let us know if you would like a more in-depth video on Bullseye as seen in the Netflix series. And if you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.